I wrote a diary note to myself on that day, and I talked about I'm starting my own practice today. I may go bankrupt, but I'm doing it anyway.
In 1988, Mark Chinn put on his finest suit and drove to a P.O. box that didn't have any mail in it. He had 2 clients, no money, and a brand new family law practice in Jackson, Mississippi. 40 years later now, he runs an attorney firm.
And what I learned after working for other people for 10 years was that no one was going to give me what I wanted. I had to go get what I wanted. And I swore after working for other people for 10 years that no one would ever be my boss ever again.
Welcome back to Process Over Pressure. Chad Parrish, your host. I have a special guest with me today, Mark Chinn. In 1988, Mark Chinn put on his finest suit and drove to a P.O. box that didn't have any mail in it. He had 2 clients, no money, and a brand new family law practice in Jackson, Mississippi. 40 years later now, he runs an attorney firm all over the state of Mississippi. He also is recently awarded the 2026 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Mississippi Bar Association. He's written 4 books on how to actually run a law firm and has spent 2 decades trying to convince his entire profession to stop billing by the hour. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my guest, Mark Chinn.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for hopping on and spending a little time with me. It really means a lot. I had the opportunity to get to know Mark a little bit before we decided to do this podcast. And, I guess the thing that stood out to me about him is just the wealth of knowledge. You meet people sometimes that have lived life and have experienced a lot of things. And he has certainly done that. And the great thing is he's still going strong. And I think he would tell you he's still learning today. Is that true?
Absolutely. Live, learn, or die.
That's pretty much sums it up, right? I mean, that's what we're at. Someone asked me the other day, they said, when do you get to where you learn everything? And I'm like, I don't think that ever exists. I think you constantly are learning and constantly evolving and getting better and really just honing in on your craft if you're good at it. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
So, Mark, I'd like to dive in. We've kind of had a pre-talk a little bit and really just get to know you. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about why law? Why did you pick that?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot of people thought that they would be any number of things when they were growing up. I have never wanted to be anything but a lawyer. I'm not exactly sure where that came from. I do remember watching some television shows. One that sticks out of my mind was Petrocelli. I believe he lived in a trailer out in the desert in Phoenix, but he solved people's problems. He fixed things. And I just have always felt that law was at the very center of civilization, that without the law, we don't have any civilization. So it's at the very center of everything we do. And it's at the very center of the way our culture operates. And a person who works in the law has the opportunity to change lives and to change society. And I was always drawn to that. Yes, I'll admit that I probably wanted to be Gale Sayers too and run a football like he did for the Bears, but that wasn't in the cards for me. Law degree was more accessible than his talent.
We're all designed to have a calling and something that we're designed to do. And, often I think back of, man, I really wanted to be this. This is what I wanted to do. But I think there was other plans for me that you look back kind of, I'm sure you do this, and I've done it. When you look at where you are today and go, man, I'm exactly where I was supposed to be. And so I'm sure, you're the same way. But one thing that is interesting in me and kind of I talked about it, On that day in July the 1st, 1988, going and putting on your fine suit and going into a practice that really had no foot, was nothing. You just started from the ground. How did you feel that day? What was the feeling, if you can remember, going back into your, like, sitting there looking at yourself in the mirror before you walked out?
It was pretty much a 10-year evolution. I was raised by a good, solid middle class family. My father was a mechanical engineer, went to work early every day, came home late. My mother was a stay at home mom. And I was raised with very traditional values. And those values were, if you work hard for someone, if you do what you're supposed to do and keep your head in the game with them, they will take care of you and you will be rewarded. And what I learned after working for other people for 10 years was that no one was going to give me what I wanted. I had to go get what I wanted. And I swore after working for other people for 10 years that no one would ever be my boss ever again, that my name would never be second ever again. I was jumping into the deep end and going for it all on my own. I can remember you talked about the suit. I wrote a diary note to myself on that day, and I talked about uh, I'm starting my own practice today. I may go bankrupt, but I'm doing it anyway. I got up this morning, I put on my best three-piece suit and drove to the office knowing that I had no one to see. And I drove by the post office box to look for the mail, even though I knew no mail would be there. But I'm going for this. There was a lot of fear involved, but you have to a lot of people don't understand this when I talk to them about litigation and about getting into a fight from a figurative sense, is you're not going to be formidable at what you do unless you are willing to lose. And so I reached a point where I was willing to lose more than I was willing to stay where I was. And so that led me to jump off the cliff into the deep end. And what I that I did not have any clue was coming my way was that people helped me. People came out of the woodwork to help me. Now, they weren't sending me high dollar cases, but they were sending me a case that maybe nobody else wanted, a case that nobody else could figure out, a case that maybe there wasn't a lot of money involved, but they sent it to me. And uh, I didn't expect the generosity of other people. And so I did learn what I believe is a valuable life lesson, is that you're not getting anywhere without the community around you. The community that you're in will either lift you up or not. And that's what happened with me unexpectedly. I got lifted up all along the way by people that I didn't even hardly knew.
That's such a great story. And really, it's the, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as someone, even like myself, jumping out, have worked for somebody for 15 plus years and now going out and doing it on my own. You said something there that was just is just true. And I'm sure there's others that are listening that you were determined. Like, I'm not going to have my name second on the list anymore. Like, I'm going to do this whether I go bankrupt or not. I think that's the line that a lot of people want to do it and don't do it. And then those that say, I'm going all in no matter what happens. I think that's the difference in those that end up becoming business owners and entrepreneurs and do great things. And the ones that are always have wanted to do it and they look back 25, 30 years and say, man, I wish I would have. I wish I would have. Me and you, we just took plunge. And I think that's kind of where you have to be a little bit in doing that, because it's not going to be easy. I'm sure when you walked out and you started your own, it wasn't like it was just, you said it. It wasn't people lined up at the door waiting on you to get there. You had to go to work and work hard to create where you've done today. 4 books all over the state, Lifetime Achievement Award. They didn't just say, man, we're going to give this to you. That you had to work for it.
I've always been purpose driven. And I try to talk to young people and to other lawyers about creating a vision. I think probably one of the best books that anybody that starts a business or that wants to succeed in life should read is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That book focuses on the idea of creating a personal mission statement, a statement that says what kind of life you want to lead, and creating goals, setting goals for where you want to be, what you want to achieve, what kind of life you want to have. And I tell people what builder starts out building a house without having architectural drawings and a clear picture of what that house is going to look at before they even start. Yet so many people get that degree or get that law degree or graduate from high school, whatever it is, and think that it's just going to all somehow fall into place with no clue of what they're trying to achieve. Now, obviously, at age 25, when I got out of law school, there was a lot I didn't know. I didn't even really know what kind of law practice I wanted to have. So your personal mission statement and your goals can change, but I think one of the keys is paying attention to it. And so for me, it was usually a New Year's Day process where I would sit down and take again another look at the personal mission statement and the goals I had set before and say, okay, how did I do? Is this the direction I want to go? Do I want to make some changes to what my personal mission statement is? And do I want to make any changes to my goals? And so I probably one of the best compliments I ever got was from a friend of mine, first guy I met in the law school registration line, maybe some 20, 30 years ago. He said, Mark, you have always seemed to know where you were going and you went there. And I thought, wow, what a great statement to make to me that I looked to him like somebody who knew what they were trying to accomplish and did.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
that's a huge compliment, and just shows that you're, even in your early in your career, you knew what you wanted to become, and kind of leads me to the next thought is, listen, I have to believe that there's not every lawyer lining up to say, you know what, I want to be in family law. That's what I want to do. In the world we live in today, corporate law and all these sexy words and everything that everybody's doing. But, you mentioned something, at 25, when you got it, you're practicing law. And I think a lot of people today feel like they have to walk into the job knowing what they're going to do when they're 50 years into it. And that's not necessarily true because there's different courses, different paths it's going to take you on. So, there's probably some people listening that maybe, coming out of law school, they're sitting there going, man, this is what I really wanted to be. And for you, you found your love in family law. And, maybe tell us a little bit, why you picked family law and how it happened. Maybe you didn't want to be in family law. You just fell in love with it. I don't know.
there's a book called Reframe Your Brain. And one of the great statements that I saw in Reframe Your Brain that I don't think I've ever seen anywhere else is that your job is to find a better job. Your job is to find a better job. In other words, always be looking forward, always be looking for a way to leap from where you are. And so I tried all kinds of different practices. I tell people I've been in every court from Justice Court in Mendenhall to the United States Supreme Court, and I've practiced every kind of law. I haven't done much bankruptcy or taxation, but I've done every kind of law, been in every kind of court. I've been before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and argued appellate cases on a high level. I've done it all. And when I started out 1988, I wanted to have a general practice. My mantra was, give it to me. I can try any case, anywhere, anytime on any subject. And that was the mantra that I operated on. And I took a lot of pride in being able to go anywhere, anytime on any type of case. In about 1989, the Mississippi Bar created a project where they offered a contract law practice management consultant to members of the Mississippi Bar. And I took advantage of that. And the first thing he did when we sat down together, and then, of course, this is before the age of computers or lots of data, but he said, "What kind of practice do you have?" And I said, "Well, I do a little bit of everything." And he said, "Well, how can we figure out what kind of cases you have?" And I thought, I don't know, maybe my deposit slips. And so I gave him my deposit book, and he would say, "Okay, Jones." I said, "Oh, well, that's an auto accident." Okay, Miller. Oh, well, that's a contract. Okay, another name. Well, that's a corporation. And what another name? I'd say, well, that's a divorce. By the time we were done, after about an hour, obviously I had a very general practice and did a lot of different things, but he looked at me and he said, "Mark, you're a divorce lawyer."
Hmm.
And I said, "No, anything but that." Because in 1989 and 1990, there was really only one lawyer in the state that was crazy enough to say that all they did was divorce.
Yeah.
And he was a leader in that respect. So he said, "You must specialize." And I said, "I don't want to specialize. I don't want to not take something." He said, "No, you must specialize." And when you think about it, Mark Chinn, all alone in his office in Jackson, Mississippi, with 6,000 lawyers at the time in Mississippi, it's probably two or three times that now. But how would anybody know to pick me out of that crowd? And so it became very evident to me that specialization was the key, creating some unique niche that you could occupy that maybe none of the other 6,000 lawyers occupied or occupied well, so that you could then garner that business. And so over time, I built on that concept. Why am I a divorce lawyer? I think that it's the personal connection that you have with a divorce client is unlike anything else in law. Obviously, divorce is very personal. So someone is bringing their life to you in shambles. And my goal is to create options for them and to create an opportunity for them to turn disaster into greatness, to turn suffering into joy and a better life going forward somehow. And so what could be more compelling than knowing that someone's entrusting their life to you in the worst of times, and it's up to you to use your care and your abilities and your experience to give them a life that they've dreamed of, hopefully.
Yeah, it's so well said. I don't think coming to you in that time, you said it best. That's not someone's best time. No one's like, well, this is great. I mean, this is a very difficult time on everybody. And the delicacy that you handle it and the way you go about it, that thought process of, I want when they're I think you said like when their life is in shambles, someone there just to help. Because really, like, who do you turn to? Like, chances are that your family's upset with you, or you're going through just a very difficult time, and you got to have somebody there that's like, listen, this is exactly what you have to do, and this is what you need to do, and that's just a delicate situation, and my hats off to you because, like I said, I don't think there's 100 law students coming out going, you know what, I'm going into family law. That's where I'm headed. And so, but that's what you've built your career on, and you could have done probably a thousand other things, and smart enough to do, and again, you've tried a lot of cases in a lot of different courts, and could do any of it. But that's the purpose that you were put here. You said it, purpose driven life. And I think that's probably the purpose that you had is exactly what you're doing.
We were in Key Largo many years ago, 20 something years ago, and we were at a particular place where a lot of yachts were docked. And so, as my wife and I were sitting at the pool, we could watch these magnificent yachts going in and out of the bay there into dock and going out to sea. And she turned to me and she said, "Mark, you need to go into asbestos. I want a yacht." And I tell that story because one of the main reasons to set to create a mission statement is to know why you're doing what you're doing. So, yes, if the number one goal in my law career was probably to make a lot of money, there are other choices that I could have made. But my mission statement, the one that I've written and stayed with for many years, says nothing about money. So when I sat down and wrote, what kind of life do I want to lead? The first thing I thought, uh, my wife, no, I thought, no, God has to be number one, doesn't it? And so I wrote down, God will be number one in my life. I will lead a spiritual life. I will go to church. I like to sing in the choir. I will sing in the choir. I will be a faithful churchgoer, and I will try to use the word whenever appropriate in my practice to help people. And then number two, my wife. My wife is the number one person on this earth. She's the number one thing on this earth. And so I wrote down what kind of husband I wanted to be. Then the next thing was my children. They come next. And I tell many people this in the context of successful marriage and what happens to people in divorce. Your spouse is not the number one thing to you in your life. Then your lives start to diverge. And so a typical example, and I don't mean for this to be gender based, but a typical example might be that the man dedicates himself to his career, dedicates himself to his physical body, dedicates himself to his connections, to his friends, to his golf game, because that's where the connections are and that's where his joy as a man is. And at the same time, the woman is dedicating herself to the children and to creating a great home and to all those things. And when you hear that scenario, you think, well, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is that both parties' dedication should first be towards that marriage.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that the marriage bond is the very foundation of absolutely everything else. If the marriage bond breaks down, then the child rearing breaks down. If the marriage and the child rearing breaks down, then people break down. And when people break down, they don't do the kind of work that they need to do. So again, creating the priorities and creating the focus is what's really important in how you lead your life. And that has to be reevaluated, and it probably has to change as time goes by.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and just great wisdom. I think it's spot on. Foundation. Um, kind of shifting a little bit of gears because we talk about foundation, or we talk about, you know, one of the things that I've noticed, I've spoken, what I do with a lot of law firms. And one of the things that seems to have that keeps coming up that I keep hearing. And I'm asking, maybe you could elaborate, or maybe you're like, no, that's not me. But it seems that, when you go to law school, they prepare you for the law. You know the law. I mean, that's what you're prepared for. But running a business, they don't do a lot of classes on, hey, here's how we're going to run a business. And so I hear this a lot from lawyers and those that have got operational people. It's like, I can practice law, but the business side of it is tough, and they don't do a very good job. And obviously, you've got to practice as long as you have. But what about the time when you realize, okay, I'm a lawyer, but I also own a business, and I gotta figure out how to run the business too.
One of the interesting things you'll hear from lawyers is, I just want to practice law. These clients are a
Yeah,
real annoyance to me.
I hear that all the time. Yeah, I hear it.
I think I've always been by nature marketing and management driven in addition to law practice driven. But a key time in my evolution was participating in coaching. At times, I've had maybe three different coaches, and for different aspects of my life and for different aspects of my practice. I believe very much in getting coaching. And as a part of the coaching I had with a group called Atticus out of Orlando, Florida, they gave me the book, The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It's a magnificent book. And it talks about exactly the thing that you're mentioning, that one of the biggest problems for professionals or people with a skill is that they love their skill and they hone their skills as what he calls a technician. And so they're magnificent technicians, but they ignore the management and the marketing. And in order to be successful, you have to have those three abilities. You have to have the ability of a technician, but you have to have the ability of a manager, and you have to have the ability of a relations specialist. And so I became dedicated to service in addition to how to practice law properly. I became dedicated to how can I deliver what I call Rich Carlton service? How can I deliver a service that makes people feel truly cared for? I can remember as a part of my coaching, one of the drills they gave me was to interview people who sent me business. And so I made a list of about 10 people and I called them up and I said, "You send me business, I really appreciate it. Would you mind telling me why you send me business?" And more times than not, I got the answer, "Because we know you'll take care of it." And I thought, you know, it was disappointing at first because I was hoping they would say, "You're brilliant. We've heard you're a magnificent orator in court.
Yeah.
You're unstoppable.
Yeah.
You're all of those attributes." And they didn't say that. They said, "We know you'll take care of it." And so, like I said, at first I was disappointed, but then I thought about it and I thought, well, wait a minute now, that's got at least two parts to it that are pretty cool. Number one is take care of it means I'll get the job done. And so many people get work, but they don't do it. But the other part was the use of the word care. Care brings not just a getting the job done element to it. Care brings a personal care about the other person, care about their circumstances, not just getting the job done. And so I really like that. And so I looked everywhere for what makes a level of service feel great. And I joked that one of the places that I looked was the lady who cut my hair. It was a spa. And so I would go in and there'd be nice music, there'd be a nice smell, there'd be candles burning, there'd be a pretty receptionist behind the desk, and she would say, "Hello, Mr. Chinn. I can't believe you're here for a haircut. It looks so good the way it is now." Just something like that, just to get you started. And then they they had somebody wash your hair. And they didn't just wash your hair, they would take 15 washing your hair, which has zero to do with a good haircut, right?
That's right.
For me. So, but it added to the experience. And so I looked at things like that and those business and other business. I said, how can I bring a great feeling to my clients? And there was a book I read back then, I haven't picked it up in a long time, called The Experience Economy.
Mhm.
And it talks about how a great business doesn't just deliver a service, they deliver an experience. And so early on in my practice, I began focusing on how can I deliver not just a good legal product to people, but a great experience. And then I had a hip replacement some 25 years ago. And I was and back in those days, you were in the hospital for 2 or 3 days. It wasn't outpatient like it is today. So I'm in the hospital and I can't sleep. And when I finally fall asleep, they wake me up and do whatever they do, take temperature, whatever they think they're doing when they wake you up. And so you can't sleep. And then when you sleep, you get woken up. And so then you're in a bad mood and you're in pain. One morning, there was no coffee. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning, there was no coffee. And I don't do this. I'm a pretty nice guy most of the time, but I really let some nurse have it about the fact that I didn't have any coffee, and I threw my coffee pot across the room against the wall. It wasn't like me to do that. And about 10:30, they had me out in the hallway walking, and down the hallway comes my surgeon. He was a magnificent, brilliant man, holding a cup of coffee. And he came up to me with a wry smile and says, "Here, I hear you need this." And so it made me think my clients are in the same pain that I was in when I had that hip surgery. My clients need the same level of patience and sympathy and care that my surgeon showed me in bringing me a cup of coffee and chuckling about the fact that I acted the way I had. And so I tell people we try to treat people like they're coming out of surgery and they're in pain, and we understand and we want to try and make it better for
Yeah. No, that's good. Very, very good. Um, and this is kind of on the line of that. You've written 4 books and probably got 2 or 3 more you're probably working on, if I had to guess. But one of them that specifically, when I was looking at my research, you wrote a book, how to build and manage a family law practice for the ABA. But you revised that. You did do some revisions to it, and I'm curious, when you wrote that book, and of course, then you did some revision to it. What was the one process that you noticed? I have to believe in your book. I have not read the book, but I have to believe that most lawyers were getting wrong when they were trying to build a firm. And so, when you was writing that, what was maybe 1 or 2 things that it's like, this is the nugget I'm going to give.
it had to be revised because of computers, email, and the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Computers, email, and the internet. I joke that before 2000, before really got going with computers, I would get a letter. I would go to the post office box, get my mail, and bring it and put it on my desk, and then open each letter and read it, and usually get mad, and then go to the file room, pull the paper file, bring it back to my desk, flip through the file, through what we called the correspondence section of the letters, the paper letters, and then maybe we had another separate index for what we call the pleadings, the complaints and the answers and all that, and flip through that. And then I would pull out the dictaphone, right? And I would dictate a letter to someone about what I had just received and what was happening next, whatever. I would dictate that, and then I would take the file and the tape and take it to my secretary's desk and in hopes that she would type it soon. And then I would read it, proofread it, and then it would be put in an envelope and mailed. All right. So that might take half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever. And I might, during that process, when I was billing by the hour, I might hit 12 files a day if I was lucky. I mean, to get my, 8 or 10 hours a day, whatever I was trying to get. But I might hit 8 or 12 files if I was lucky. Today, with, I'm sitting here looking at 3 computer screens. I have my chat GPT open on the far right. I've got my calendar and this screen open in the center, and over on the left, I've got all my documents, every single document in every case. We keep no paper except where we have to keep an original, which is rare now. So there's no paper. There is a file room, but I don't go to it. And so today, instead of all that process I described before, I get an email, I look at it, I look at my case management system on the file, then I look at documents in the system. Takes me minutes, if not seconds, and then I type an email response of some kind, or I'll go into my document assembly program and generate a legal document within minutes. All of that used to take, hours. And
Yeah.
so the practice has been completely transformed by technology. Marketing. Let me talk quickly about marketing, maybe as an aside. Used to be proud to write about and talk about personal marketing, how marketing was about personal relationships. And I talked about things like looking someone in the eye, looking at someone so carefully in the eye, you actually could tell what color their eyes were, paying that much attention to them, and handing them a business card. And I talked about the ways to hand a business card. For example, you hand a business card to somebody with two hands, and you take a business card with two hands as though it's something special. And that I guess that's all still very important, But the truth of the matter is, 20 years ago, 60% of my cases came from other lawyers who don't do what I do. 20% came from satisfied past customers, and another 10 or whatever percent came from random referrals. So today, 90 plus percent of my business comes from SEO, searches on the internet for divorce lawyers in Jackson, Mississippi. Not that referrals have stopped, it's just that the marketing has completely flipped from personal to whatever people can find on the internet. When you're with somebody and you got to you got to answer a question, what do? You go to your phone, punch it in.
100%. Yeah.
And along these lines, in the last year, if not less, I've noticed that it's changed again, that it's Chat GPT. And people are going to Chat GPT and say, tell me who the best lawyer is a divorce lawyer is in Mississippi. And that's where they're getting their answers. And so much has changed because of the technology.
No, it has, and it's really, um, I mean, the way we do business today is different. 10 years from now, the way we do business 10 years from now is gonna be different than the way we do it now, and you mentioned something about the internet, and you're right. 20 years ago, when the internet started, we all had the dial, and it took forever to get on it, and it was just like this is the I can remember because I kind of grew up right when it came out. I was like, this is horrible. This is going to slow everybody down. This is going to take too much time. There's no way I'm going to do that. And there was a big resistance, and here we are now where AI is out there, and so much change with that, and we're having the same conversation. It's the same conversations. I talk to people, and I do a lot of AI automation, but I get this all the time. This is ridiculous. We got to slow it down. I just read. I think today they're trying to get a Bernie Sanders or whatever's coming out with this group to fight AI and all this. And I'm thinking we're doing the same thing we did with the internet. Here it is, and in 20 years now, it's going to be something different. And it's really, we have to incorporate what we can incorporate it in our business and help our business grow. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind.
Everybody's using it. I see my wife talking to Chat GPT on her phone, asking answers to all kinds of questions. It's fairly routine for us to get challenged on law by clients who are looking up law on Chat GPT. I get letters from clients that I can tell they got Chat GPT to help them with. I had an assessment with a client yesterday, and she had sent me all of her file materials, and she herself had saved in there a Chat GPT summary of a guardian ad litem report. I said, okay, I'm going to look at your Chat GPT summary here. I see you've done that. She said, yes, I did. And so it's it's uh it's inexorable. Anybody who thinks they're going to try and stop this is nuts. I mean,
Yeah,
it's inexorable, and lawyers are afraid of change. And the first thing that comes out of a lawyer's mouth when you talk about anything new is they'll say, well, is that ethical? Can I do that? Can I do that? Because
yeah,
lawyers are terrified
sure,
of licensure action and terrified of the ethics code. And so my attitude on that is, yes, I'm going to pay attention. Yes, I'm going to try and make sure that everything I do is authentic. But to ignore these tools, I don't think anybody wants a lawyer that would ignore these tools.
right.
As a matter of fact,
So-
I have a AI robot that answers my phone 24/7. Her name is Alex. You should call her sometime. And I have actually suggested to the person who owns that agent, shouldn't she just say, I'm Mark Chinn, or I'm Chinn Associates AI receptionist? I mean, people can kind of tell, but wouldn't it be kind of impressive to people to know that we are doing that and that we are using that technology? So I haven't done that yet, but the
That's
point I'm
great.
trying to make is I think people want to see that. And we are using all these agents now, analyzing documents, generating cross examinations based on certain information. And the stuff is just spot on. And it just literally saves hours and hours and hours. You always check it. You always make sure that it's yours. But to not use these tools is just, you're going to get left behind.
I agree.
I can deliver a product. The more we use AI, the more I feel like I've always been one of the best divorce lawyers in the world. But I know now nobody can meet the product that I'm delivering with some of the AI agents that we've put into place here in this office. Nobody can match it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're spot on. I think you're spot on because the thing that angle that you're taking is not replacing who you are and the knowledge that you have in your head. You're just using it as an assistant to help you process faster so that you can spend more time to review it and say, okay, this is a great point. This is not, this is that. It just helps you arrive at what you'd already do faster than it did 5 years ago. That's the way you're using it, and that's a great way to use it. I tell people all the time, use it as a tool to help you be faster at what you're good at. Looking at a case, diving into a case, the facts, the cross examination, those pieces, you can do that all day long in your sleep. That's what you know. You know it very well. Give me the information that I'm having to before, where you had to go down to a hallway or have a secretary or two or three paralegals to decipher to give you the report so that you can do that. There's no way one person can do that for a big case. It's just making it faster for you to get to where you can take it and say, I'm ready. And to me, that's tools that we should do those because that's just saving you more time and making you want to practice longer. I think we'll see people that want to practice longer because if they accept some of these tools because it's going to make their job more efficient.
Less tedious too. So you're the technology genius. I'm just a country lawyer. But I do have some visions for how I want things to work. I'm not necessarily going to try in any way to say something technological, but here I go. It's my understanding that AI can be intuitive or not. And so, in other words, intuitive means that the AI will learn. So we have already built a system for doing one aspect of our business, what we call the assessment process, where we bring clients in and give them an assessment of their case, their options, what we think they ought to do, full discussion of the laws, the pros and cons, and then also a case plan and pricing because we charge fixed prices. So when we created that agent, we put into it all the assessments and case plans that I had done before. We also put a lot of my writings in there and my books. We fed my books into the AI agent so that it knows me. And so the product AI is going to develop so much so that it will be able to do me better than me. I'll never forget. I had a wonderful paralegal to help me build my business, and she started out knowing zero, but became the finest paralegal in the world. And one day she brought me something, and I said, "This is pretty good." And I said, "How'd you do this?" She said, "Well, I just took something you did 3 years ago and updated it." She said, "I just did what you did, copied what you did." So AI will help me make sure that I'm always delivering that product that maybe I worked on so hard before, and it will make sure I don't leave something out. It'll make sure it's perfect, but it's going to be my product. And certainly after I review it, it's my product. Another thing we're learning, which
That's it.
maybe to your audience is nothing new, but we're learning that you have to talk to your AI agent almost like a person. You have to give it information. You have to tell it what you're trying to do, maybe why you're trying to do it, what kind of language you want to do, what kind of level of sophistication you want. And then a thing I heard like 2 days ago was you should always ask it, is there any more detail that you need from me before you answer my question, which I think is interesting. So, and I've actually had an associate come into me and say, Well, I was fighting with Chat GPT all this afternoon, so I went to Claude and got a quick answer. And so I'm not saying the AI agents have personalities, but if you learn how to work with them and give them what you want to come back, it will learn and give you. Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah, it's true.
In communicating with AI, do you think it's not long before instead of dictating or typing in a question, I'm just on camera talking to my AI agent so she or he can see my expression and then hear my voice and then start to learn to translate that personality into what's done?
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty close. I would imagine you'll see that either this year it develop more. They've already got it where you can just WordPress, talk right to it, and just adding the characters of the face to read is not far off. And I think you make a great point. You have to, when you think about, I always tell people when I'm talking to them about, you know, AI and how to use some of that, is you got to think about it like it's a true colleague. It's not a human, but you got to be able to push back. If you and I were sitting in your office and we were having a conversation about a case, and you said something that I was like, that was interesting, but I'm not 100% sure. I might come back at you and go, okay, but can you elaborate a little deeper, or can you go a little deeper on that because I'm not following what you're saying. Same conversation you would have with your AI is, okay, I hear that, but I need you to go a little deeper here. I need you to elaborate on this, or I need you to put it in, simple terms for my client to understand. It will learn that and start creating more of a what I call a forward facing for a client because listen, most clients can't understand the legal
Sorry to
jargon.
interrupt, but you have an appointment soon.
That they can understand, like when you put it in a jargon that they can understand and read it, and that's so helpful. And that's the way you have to treat it. You have to treat it like it's another colleague, and then you're kind of debating back and forth with it. And so, yeah,
And you've just made several facial expressions
yeah,
while saying that. And
yeah,
so I'm saying we're thinking within a year, our AI agents are going to be able to read our expressions to tell more about us and what we're asking them to do.
yeah. I think it's very close. Yeah. So, well, listen, Mark, we're at time. I'm gonna close shop. Thank you so much for being on the show. What a great show! Really appreciate it. Again, I can't thank you enough. It's been awesome.
It's been a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you again in some weeks or months as this all develops.